6 p.m. So I will call this January 9th, 2024 regular meeting of the Wenatchee School District School Board to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Bear with me. Esta junta se lleva a cabo en inglés, pero contamos con servicio de traducción. Si alguien gusta hacer un comentario público o recibir explicaciones en español, por favor indique su necesidad. So we will now work through the agenda. Are there any proposed changes or modifications to the agenda? Hearing none. We'll begin with the consent agenda. The consent agenda was sent to the board and posted online last week. The board's had an opportunity to review the materials and individually ask the superintendent for any questions on items on the agenda. The consent agenda includes the minutes from the December 12th, 2023 regular meeting, vouchers and payroll, the personnel report, surplus report, contracts, field trips, the October 2023 financial report, and the December 2023 enrollment report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda is approved unanimously. Next is citizen comments. If any member of the public would like to comment, we ask that you please sign up online at least 15 minutes before the meeting or in person. Each comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Our board secretary will keep a timer and will notify you as your time expires. Kim, do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, we have Dorothy Ferguson in person and Brian Higgins online.
Okay. You want to start with the online comment first? Well, okay.
Have to go to a satellite. Just give it
There we go. My name is Brian Higgins. Of course, first off, thank you for letting me speak tonight. I just wanted to give a final shout out to those volunteers that have been helping out in my leadership class lately. By the way, my name is Brian Higgins. I live on South Meadow Street. I work at Wenatchee High School. I teach leadership and AVID. In both those classes, we get a lot of volunteers, a lot of people in the community connecting pretty strongly with our kids and giving them options and chances to perform community service and make connections. And I know I've mentioned a couple of these names before, but I wanted to thank Elizabeth Drath and Alan Walker from the Chelan Douglas Community Action Council, Olga Jimenez from CAFE, Pamela Nell from the Humane Society, Paolo Estrada from Link Transit, Diana Zaragoza from Columbia Valley Community Health, Victor Estrada from the Women's Resource Health, Dr. Fabiola Barbosa from the Washington Apple Education Foundation, and Susan and Gary Steele from the People's Foundation. All of these people gave up anywhere between a half an hour to 45 minutes of their time to be interviewed by a leadership student about really strong leadership traits and leadership as a philosophy, and give a chance for our students to connect and have some one-on-one interaction. And it is amazing to see our community members really getting into our classrooms, volunteering in our schools, really making connections with students, because I think that we hear a lot publicly about how our students are missing out on a lot of those soft skills that help them in these situations. And we have students really making connections using these skills all the time. We just don't hear about it a lot. And another volunteer I wanted to give a shout out to, who has been a volunteer or had been a volunteer in my classroom for years. And by volunteer in my classroom, I mean, she showed up every Monday to each of my AVID classes. She taught my students how to loom hats. She taught them how to have conversations with adults, taught them just how to talk and be with each other. And then we took those hats and donated them locally and to other organizations. And her name was Aida Bound. And she died in October, which is a big loss, because she had just been almost to the point where she could meet my students this year after having a stroke and suffering a stroke and building her skills back up. And this is the year that my AVID students have knitted the most, like loomed the most hats. We just sent 175 hats to a previous AVID student of mine who writes for a newspaper in Nogales. so that they can be handed them out to people who have been waiting in line for hearings, to talk, to become part of their community, and freezing. And it's amazing to see our local Avid students making connections with Avid alumni from 10 years ago, making connections to the world at large. And so I wanted to give a shout out to all volunteers because your work in our classrooms is not unnoticed and we don't want to ignore it. And I especially want to give a shout out to Ida Bound, who has made a major impact on a countless number of lives in our valley and elsewhere. So thank you very much for giving me the chance to speak. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Brian. Next comment. Is it Dorothy? Dorothy. Okay, Dorothy Ferguson.
Push the button on top. Okay. I'm Dorothy Ferguson. I live on Concord Place in Wenatchee, Washington. I'm a grandmother to some students in Wenatchee School District. In December, I read in Wenatchee World a guest opinion written by a state elected official. The headline was, "Academics is less a priority in our schools, and it shows." The writer stated that schools providing supportive services to students diminishes academics as the top priority of schools. One of the supportive services the writer identified was all-day meal programs. That includes the National School Lunch Program, which now includes breakfast, after-school snacks for students in educational enrichment activities and summer. I see things a little differently. I did a little research on this topic, and I learned that the school breakfast and lunch programs continue to have multiple positive effects on students' health, learning, and well-being. The National School Lunch Program is 77 years old. I'd like to share President Harry S. Truman's statement upon signing the National School Lunch Act in 1946. He said, "Today, as I sign the National School Lunch Act, I feel that Congress has acted with great wisdom in providing the basics for strengthening the nation through better nutrition for our school children. In my message to Congress last January, I pointed out that we have the technical knowledge to provide plenty of good food for every man, woman, and child in this country, but that despite our capacity to produce food, we have often failed to distribute it as well as we should. This action by the Congress represents a basic step forward, correcting that failure. In the long view, no nation is any healthier than its children or more prosperous than its farmers. And in the National School Lunch Act, the Congress has contributed immensely both to the welfare of our farmers and the health of our children. Under previous school lunch programs made possible by year-to-year authorizations, we've been able to provide as many as 6 million children with nutritious lunches at noon. This has laid a good foundation for the permanent program. In the future, increasing numbers will benefit and on a permanent basis. I hope that all state and local authorities will cooperate fully with the United States Department of Agriculture in establishing the cooperative school lunch in every possible community." So I just want to thank Wenatchee School District for the headline I would write is "Academics are Wenatchee School District's top priority. Wenatchee School District provides school meals to support students' learning, health, and well-being, and also we support farmers." Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. Anyone else to comment? All right, moving right along to our special presentations. Turn it over to Dr. Kalahar.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This evening we have two folks that'll be presenting on the same topic, the bond update, but I want to differentiate between the topic a little bit. We have one topic about future bonds and levies in the year of 2025, but we also have topics that will consider our 2014 bond and a possible refinance to save taxpayers some dollars moving forward. So we have both Trevor Carlson and Lee Martrizio are with us today. And we want to thank them both for being with us. They were planning on being here in person, but of course, travel has been uniquely. Yes, the passes have been close, so we just appreciate them. Trevor's going to kick us off, I believe, with his presentation, and Trevor's from Piper Sandler, and then Lee will follow up with some first reads on resolution, and Lee is from Foster Garvey. So thank you, gentlemen.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Very good. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Kim, Corey, and Sean for their flexibility to having Lee and I be a part of this program via the electronic wonder of Zoom. So thank you very much. As I'm scrolling through X, formerly called Twitter, I see that all of the passes are basically closed. So it would have been a fun afternoon trying to get to Wenatchee. Are you able to see the screen that I shared with your logo on the front? Okay, perfect. I will utilize this as a guide for our conversation. We'll talk a little bit about really just kind of laying some foundational knowledge, some terminology for us to springboard from as you consider election planning in the near future, specifically for possible operating levy and a possible bond election. So really, again, just trying to share some common information for us to, again, springboard and move forward from. And then we will discuss in a little detail the refinancing or refunding opportunity that the district has in front of it, the opportunity to move forward and save some interest cost for the district's taxpayers on the outstanding debt that was issued back in 2014. So with that, we'll jump right in. Some of these slides I'll go through pretty quickly unless you flag me down and want some more detail. I think it's probably a great reference for you all to have as you're making considerations moving forward to election planning. Again, slide 1 is a composition of election dates. There are 4 opportunities throughout the calendar year for you to access the electorate: February, April, August, November. And those dates are pretty consistent as you flip the calendar, depending on how the year falls and the dates fall, and leap years. They're all pretty much in line from year to year. Resolution filing dates, so you can look at your milestone planning and back into when you need to make decisions to file resolutions with the county auditor's office. Illustrative timeline of bond issue planning. Really a significant lift for many districts. I know folks have been through this. Some of these folks that are on the school board now have been through this in the past. Really just, again, some high level things for you to think about as you move through time. And really, again, high level thinking about the scope of work. What do those different options look like? Costing out those options. And then at the same time and simultaneously layering in the financing component to what those different scopes of work look like, or kind of early on in the calendar year. If you're looking for, let's say, a February election in calendar 25 is the example here. So backing into basically the time frame as of now, facility committee analysis of projects and community research. And then as you go through the calendar year, just fine tuning that, and then ultimately having that facilities committee make a recommendation to the superintendent or directly to the school board sometime, let's say late summer, early autumn. Then that allows the school board time for deliberations and ultimately giving the nod to Lee Marquisio and his team to draft a resolution for your consideration for a possible election. Again, the dates are listed there. There's, I believe, 3 pages here of some pretty detailed steps, and Lee is the master of these steps. So I'm stealing a little bit of his thunder, but we can definitely circle back if there are additional questions as as you're deliberating here through the data. But for an education programs and operation levy, really again a resource for you to think to have as you think through the process of moving to having a renewal of an EP&O levy. So again, that autumn time period, some things need to happen, some steps. OSPI approval in that early autumn time period. Ideally in October, you're working hand in glove with Lee, putting together the details that will go into that draft EP&O levy resolution. Kind of again during that same time period, thinking about the requirements for the local voters pamphlet, appointment of pro and con committee members, and then November timeframe adoption of that resolution and the filing with the auditor's office. So again, hopefully a good reference for you to hold on to as you're thinking about that process later in calendar 24. I'll pause for questions before I'm going to talk a little bit more about bonds specifically and not operating levies, but give me the thumbs up if you want to push forward. Okay, very good. Page 6, question I receive frequently is, when is the best time to go to the ballot for your bond election? I've broken down historical passage rates going back all the way to 1992 for, again, those 4 opportunities you have during the calendar year: February, April, August, November. Round number, half of any school bond on the ballot passes in February. Again, round number, about a third are successful in April and November. August, a little bit of an outlier, traditionally not a time when folks are running bond elections. There have only been 7 tries in August. 1 was successful. Again, no right or wrong answer. A lot of the data that I will show and display for you tonight are statewide passage rates, for example, here on page 6. Having your finger on the pulse of your community is paramount in working through really that messaging and the dollar amounts and the needs analysis that needs to happen prior to an election is very important. The bottom portion of this graphic displays the passage rates for bonds across the state of Washington in any given calendar year. Noticeable that our passage rates the last couple of years have been significantly less than average. A long-term average passage rate is 40%. So 40% of any bond on the ballot has passed over a multi-decade long stretch of time. And so 10% and 21%, for example, the last couple of years are significantly below that number. Same type of analysis and presentation for EP&O levy passage on page 7. Passage rates on those 4 different opportunities that you have on the top portion of the graph. The lower portion shows the passage rate in any given calendar year. Again, noticeably a small trail off in the total passage percentage across the state the last couple, let's say 4 years. I've added again, it's small, I apologize, on the bottom of that page, a set of numbers that shows the number of double levy failures in the color of red. That does have an impact on the total passage rate in any given calendar year. And also there's been a few more instances in recent past where maybe a school district has failed one time, come back for approval on the second try, and net that's going to draw the passage rates down ever so slightly. Capital projects levies, same type of again display with the passage rates on the top given those 4 opportunities through the calendar year. It's definitely become a popular tool for school districts to take care of annual appropriations for small works, refreshing facilities on a consistent basis, but can pose challenges for major improvements, remodels, building of new schools, just because the ability to collect taxes is within a very short period of time. And that drives up potential tax rates depending on the dollar amount that you are looking to levy in every calendar year. The next two pages show you the details of the passage rates for Washington school bonds. This is 2022. There were 4 school bonds that passed in calendar 22, North Shore, Bellingham, Highline, and Renton. Calendar 23, 2 were successful. Pasco, that top line there, and Whidbey Island in November. I know there has been some, at least feedback that I've received from your staff, and I want to touch on validation. I know Corey has reached out to the auditor's office and has asked for some specific data, so we'll be able to circle back with you once that becomes available. But I've broken out the passage rates for bonds over a long period of time. Then this is the February election results. April, again, just not, look at the numbers at the bottom. The number of attempts is significantly lower. August, as you may recall, I said 1 has passed, and that was way back in 2009. And November, I've highlighted presidential years where bond elections have taken place. Because one question I do receive very often is, should I stay away or embrace a presidential election? A little bit of a random walk. And this leads me to the discussion of validation. And I'll get a little bit ahead of myself on the slides, but I'll circle back and give some more detail regarding passage on the individual levies that you have available in your toolkit. But validation is a component of passing a school bond in the state of Washington. In Washington, we need 60% yes vote plus 40% validation. So 40% of the individuals that voted in the last general election need to turn out. So you need a critical mass, if you will, of folks to vote in the affirmative. Let's take things to extreme. You cannot have 3 voters turn out for your bond election, all vote yes and have it pass. That would be 100% passage rate, but no validation. You would not exceed that 40% number. Validation is not a systematic concern for school districts across the state. In the last 23 years, there have been 2 school districts that have failed because of validation. One was back in 2001. And it was in Spokane County. Another was in 2019 in King County. The 2001 arguably was before Lee and I's tenure. I don't have the firsthand knowledge of the issues that happened there, but that was a long time ago. But Lee and I are intimately aware of the situation that happened in 2019. And I'll chalk it up to bad luck to keep the story short. Actually, I won't. Let me talk about a little bit because it had to do with snow, just as it has impacted myself and Lee's travel. There was a big snowstorm in the Puget Sound, and it was a major contributor to the mail-in ballots not being collected in a sufficient amount to approve that issue. So just want to make sure that folks are not overly concerned about validation. Again, it's not a systematic problem. Even during years, following presidential elections, especially the last couple that have had very high turnouts, we still see bonds that pass and validate. So, not to belabor that point, let's move on. Page 15 is a graphical representation of me trying to describe to you that having a bond and levy on the ballot at the same time does not produce subpar results. So moving from left to right, the blue bar on the far left shows the passage rates for educational program and operation levies, the entire universe. The entire universe next to that in orange of all bonds that during this time period, passing at 44%. Then I've broken that entire universe into two subsets. The next in the middle shows you the passage rates for operating levies by themselves on the ballot, bonds solo on the ballot. The far right shows the passage rates when those are paired on the ballot at the same time, and the passage rates are not materially different. Let's do note that the sample size is significantly smaller for the number of levies and bonds on the ballot at the same time compared to the entire universe. So just want to make sure we're crystal clear on the data, but we haven't seen wholesale problems with the strategy of pairing them on the ballot at the same time. Again, this is a community specific topic, and you need to weigh the pros and cons of doing so. Let's talk a little bit on page 16 about your election results. Your bond election results are at the top of the page, and your operating levy results are at the bottom. Again, very strong yes vote at 63% back in February of 2001. And do remember that August 31st is very important for you. But when you're thinking about taxes and bonds and interest payments and principal payments, please have a mind shift and think about the calendar year. Tax collections are calculated and collected on a calendar year basis. So this February 21 passage then results in collections in calendar 22, 23, 24, and 25. Tax rates, a listing of your tax rates, millage rates that you've experienced, the dollars per thousand of tax associated with your bond levy, your operating levy, and then a total column on the far right. The numbers come down significantly over time. A big piece of that, or a big reason for that, has been the rapid growth of your assessed value, and we'll touch on that towards the end of the presentation. Again, massive growth within your region, and that has contributed to the size of your tax base growing. Page 18 is a comparable table of the school districts that are within your region. I broke it out between Chelan and Douglas County, took all of the districts in those two counties and ranked them from highest to lowest tax rate. Do note that assessed values vary dramatically, so not always the most fair comparison. Your tax base is very, very large compared to someone like Stehekin or even Kashmir. And do note these are 2023 values. The county treasurers and assessors are going through the exercise of finalizing the data. It will take us some time to gather that data from the 39 counties and then populate my database. So the 2024 data is not available as of yet. Page 19, I've taken districts that have a similar assessed value from across the state and ranked them from highest to lowest tax rate on the far right-hand column. Fife at $4.30, South Whidbey down at 79 cents. And again, these can change dramatically year over year based upon the changes in tax base and obviously voter approval. Remember, South Whidbey was one of the 2 school districts that passed bonds in calendar 23. And so moving forward, that 0 in their bond column will be a positive integer, and that will change the composition of their tax collections. Quick overview of bonds and capital levies. We've talked about a couple of these points, so I'll try and be brief, but there is a pretty compelling reason why most large capital projects are financed with long-term debt. Really, the biggest reason is the large cost associated with capital facilities and the upkeep and renewal. It can be spread out over a long period of time, and that can mitigate the incremental cost and tax increase to the district's residents. The other important piece is, as we've seen rapid growth in construction inflation, once we issue bonds, issue debt, we contribute those funds to your capital projects fund so you can move quickly in the construction of your facilities that were approved by voters. So having that cash up front is important. When you receive voter approval, you would issue unlimited tax general obligation bonds. And again, that revenue stream is created by the authority of the voters, allowing you to assess property taxes in sufficient dollar amounts to repay the principal and interest of the debt that is issued. Again, 40% yes vote, or excuse me, 60% yes vote required with 40% validation. I'll touch on debt capacity in just a couple slides. You can also, as I alluded to earlier when we were discussing election outcomes and percentage of passing, you could adopt a capital projects levy. Think of that as a pay-as-you-go. Very similar in mechanics to your operating levy. You would ask the voters to approve a dollar collection per year up to a total of six calendar years of collections. Major benefit there is the simple majority passage rate at 50% plus one. Again, some of the downsides, it is a pay-as-you-go type program, so it could elongate a possible construction schedule and maybe increase construction inflation risk based upon that elongated timeline. Again, a lot of the things that Lee and I will share with you from a financing perspective, there's not a right or a wrong answer. Our goal is to make sure that we're listening to you, listening to your community, and coming up with individualized plans that will work for your needs. So we can work through kind of the different, the different options through time as we start to look at your construction, your possible construction project and timelines. Debt capacity is a calculation based upon the district's assessed value. So in 2023, the district's total assessed value, round number, $7.3 billion. 5% of that is $364 million. Subtract any debt that's outstanding on the books would leave a remaining capacity, and that's the amount of debt that you could have issued in calendar 23 at $312 million and change. You can borrow without the vote of the people. That capacity is much more restricted. It is only 3/8 of 1%. So the math at the bottom of page 21 displays that capacity would be $27.3 million. Think of that as a personal loan or a loan backed by the full faith and credit of the school district, AKA the general fund. Let's talk about the bonds that are on the books today. In 2014, almost $59.5 million of bonds were issued. The outstanding principal is just a little bit over $52 million. A key piece of data here is the optional redemption date. A standard bond covenant in the tax-exempt municipal world is to have call protection or prepayment protection for the buyers of the bonds for 10 years. After 10 years, you have an option to buy those bonds back from investors at face value. And what that does is gives you a refinancing opportunity. I'll display in just a moment some of the details surrounding that. but it allows you to swap, if you will, sell bonds at lower borrowing costs today and call and redeem the existing bonds at face value that are yielding and costing more interest. You have a strong credit rating with Moody's Investor Service at AA3, and it is something that we help the district monitor and discuss on a periodic basis when Moody's performs surveillance calls on a periodic basis, usually every 12 to 24 months. So interest rates are very important. We're talking about debt. We're talking about very big loans. I think I've used the word mortgage very recently in our discussions. Really, what we're looking at today is an interest rate environment that has been much more favorable the last couple of weeks, the last couple of months. We saw a pretty rapid increase in interest rates going into September and October, and then a significant retreat in rates decreasing as we've entered into 2024. That leads me to the projected refunding and what that looks like. And we'll talk a little bit more about the process and procedure, and Lee can discuss the resolution and the copies and the details around that you have in front of you today. So that, again, the 2014 bonds, 52.07 million worth of refundable callable bonds. Those mature out through 2023. The average coupon on those bonds is 4.87%. Think of that as the cost of the old mortgage. Looking at the projected refunding results, if we were to refinance those bonds at today's interest rates, we would be looking at a cost on the new mortgage, the new bonds, at 2.81%. So think of that differential. I'll use round numbers between 5% round number on the existing debt, 3% on the new debt that would replace the old, pay off the old, generates interest cost savings in the neighborhood of $6.2 million. And that is a total savings net of all costs on a present value basis, because those savings are stretched out over time, is $5.4 million. And a way for us to measure the efficiency of the refinancing is this present value as a percentage of the old bonds that we're paying off. So dividing 5.4% into the amount of refunded bonds leads us to an extremely efficient refinancing. Usually when we are making recommendations to move forward, a 3% minimum savings target, sometimes even less depending on the circumstances, is something that we would recommend. So this is well above kind of standard procedure, if you will, for recommendations on moving forward. So a very, very healthy savings at this point. Again, this is predicated on market conditions. So we have some heavy lifting to do if you deem us to move forward on this, and it does take some time. So again, these are estimates as of now. I wanted to display on page 25 what those savings look like over time. Without getting into too much detail here, the old debt service, the potential new debt service, principal and interest payments, and the annual savings is the column that we focus on the far right. State law says that we need to have positive savings in every calendar year. And based upon the mathematics and the way we're structuring the potential new bonds to repay the old at a lower borrowing cost, that would be the stream of savings. That equals about 9 cents on your tax rate. That will change over time. Your preliminary assessed value for next year is pretty robust. So as your assessed value grows, that number will probably shrink over time, but that just kind of gives you a sense of the magnitude of the refunding savings. most of the time, if we're when we execute these refinancings, we're talking just a handful of pennies is the usual savings, maybe a nickel. Anything close to a dime is it's a very robust bond refunding. Schedule of events. If this is something that you are interested in moving on, we have put together a schedule that gets us in the market in a fairly rapid fashion. Briefing you tonight on the financing plan is an important piece, and consider it first reading, if you will. January 23rd would be board adoption of the bond delegation resolution that's in front of you in draft form. We'll have a conversation with Moody's Investor Service to allow them the process of their due diligence to assign a credit rating to the district and the bonds. We'll go through some internal paperwork and review process, ultimately getting down to a point where on March 5th, we would offer the new bonds to the public, the investing public, and lock in fixed borrowing costs on behalf of the district and finalize the total savings, and then close a couple weeks later. Just kind of like your mortgage, there's a lock-in period. Let's lock in the rate, and then it takes some time to do the paperwork. And Lee and his team are really, really good at that stuff. I'll pause there. I've hit you with a lot of information. Any questions about the refinancing opportunity? That's really the, I think as Corey mentioned, kind of the key piece that's in front of us today. And then alongside that is kind of the long-term bond planning analysis and discussion.
So I do have a question about the refinancing. Is March 5th then what I'm hearing the earliest date we can lock in a rate on the new bonds?
Yes, at this point, that is correct. It may seem that is, I'm kind of putting words in your mouth, but I'm reading between the lines. You may ask, can we move faster? There are many steps that need to be taken. The disclosure document that we utilize in the marketing of the bonds is substantial. Without appendices, it's probably a 60-page document. Lee and his team have begun the process of compiling that document. So it's very substantial. And there are certain requirements from outside parties that do create a little bit of a, constraints in how fast we can move. The state treasurer's office, for example, would like us to have 30 days in between the time we apply for the school bond guarantee program, which is, think of that as a cosigner program with the state of Washington. It adds belt and suspenders to the credit worthiness of the bonds that would be issued on behalf of the Wenatchee School District. And so there's just some things that that take some time, especially when you're thinking about issuing securities that there are a lot of zeros on these transactions. And so we have to be very mindful and make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
One more question then. Do you foresee any concerning potential for variability between now and that time? I know it's not a very long time, but in the financial markets and an election year and fear of recessions looming, I feel like it's still enough time for a lot to happen. Yeah,
and that is always the consideration and the risk of these transactions. So we're being mindful of economic certainties, Federal Reserve policy meetings, things that are market moving information data points. So we've taken a lot of that into consideration during the planning of our proposed schedule on page 26. The delegation resolution that is in draft form, that is in your hands now, does give us a lot of flexibility in making changes to the ultimate pricing date where we're locking in the borrowing cost. So for example, if on March 5th, something, was outside the norm, a black swan event, market conditions were extremely unfavorable, we can push the pause button, assess, and come back in a more normalized environment. Again, just hypothetically, it doesn't happen very often, but as you've noted, there are events that happen outside of our purview, and they can roil markets and create situations that are challenging. So the delegation resolution does create a lot of flexibility in allowing staff to move forward at the opportune time.
I had one more question. So it sounds like once we get this ball rolling, we're doing it at some point. We have a little bit of flexibility. It doesn't have to be March 5th. Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct. I am 99% sure we will march towards March 5th and make that happen. It is very rare where circumstances dictate that we need to deviate. Great questions.
I have a question for a bit of information. In the hypothetical schedule between the 5th of March, when the bonds are priced, and 3 weeks later, when the closing happens, could you walk through any critical underwriting subscription steps as you retire the old bonds and establish purchases of the new bonds? Are there any issues that we need to be aware of?
Wonderful question. The process of locking in borrowing costs on March 5th, and then the behind the scenes work to redeem the old bonds, issue as of, in this case, March 27th is the official issuance date of the new bonds. There would be a party, U.S. Bank, that would be involved in helping us redeem the old bonds. So the process is tried and true, and Lee and his team will assist in making sure that documents are buttoned up, that service providers are clear on their responsibilities, and then ultimately close and release funds on the 27th. And that's really, funds are moving in different ways, and things are finalized and locked down, usually at 9 a.m. On the date of closing. Lee, any behind the scenes kind of process and procedure
No,
that you would like to touch on?
That's a really good question. The bonds price, and there's a commitment on if it happens on the 5th by Piper Sandler, and the bond purchase agreement is entered into that day and accepted by the district officials who have been delegated the authority. So that would be Corey and Sean here. And at that point, Piper Sandler is committed to purchasing all of the bonds. So the district does not have an obligation, and it doesn't need to check whether or not, Trevor's got them all at that point. So they're his.
Great questions.
There is, his bond purchase agreement will have calamity events between the date of pricing and the date of closing. Again, that would be contingent, but again, no, we haven't seen a failed closing for those reasons. I've never seen one. I'm certain.
No, thank you very much. That fills in the gap that I was looking for.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I have a question, and it might be a silly question because there's no such thing as a stupid question. So in regards to the annual savings, is that money that just stays in the general fund?
No, wonderful question. Great question. No, and there are no silly or other types of questions. That's why we're here. Those are taxes that taxpayers expect to pay, but we will be reducing in those time periods. For example, in calendar 25, somewhere to the tune of $700,000, again, depending on ultimate final market conditions. So that is a reduction in the taxes that are paid by property tax payers within the district's boundaries.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And so that return, what you said, 2025, around the year 2025?
Yeah, so on page 25, this far right-hand column shows the as of today, based on today's market conditions, the savings that would transpire in each calendar year. So about $700,000 in each calendar year, which then equates, I put a little note at the bottom of that page, of a tax rate savings of about 9 cents.
Gotcha. So I'm just thinking about the, future bond. It would be a communication factor, right? For the district saying, hey, you're seeing this reduction in the current tax bracket, your current tax bracket, that will be, okay, I gotcha. I just had to talk that out in my.
Yeah, no.
One of those, like, you're saving 9 cents for every $1,000 of your property value already because we've refinanced these things. So take that into consideration when you're thinking about this in the future, what you will pay in addition to whatever you're having.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
That
Correct.
leaves one more question for me then, because we were doing this potentially doing this refinance in 2024, and these will now be called the 2024 bonds. Do you foresee any communication issues with going out the very next year seeking new bonds? I can see our citizens getting a little confused now saying, didn't you just get bonds last year? Is that something you've run into? It's kind of unavoidable, but any experience with that?
No, this is, I have not. That's an interesting twist that I haven't considered or run across. One thing that we will do at the time of issuance of the debt of the new bonds and the refinancings complete is provide you with a draft of a press release that you can utilize to get the good news out. That says that you're good stewards of the district's taxpayers and you've saved X dollars on behalf of the taxpayers by refinancing the district's existing debt. And yeah, I don't know if that's I haven't seen that become problematic in the, I've been doing this 20 years. I've never seen it or heard of voters having pushback because of the scenario that you described.
Thanks, Trevor. I was just thinking, some of the verbiage that we can put out as a district is it's a refunding or a refinance of the 2014 bond. So we'll continue to make sure that our community does understand that this is something that was passed and voted on in 2014. So there isn't any confusion, but we'll have to make sure that we're very intentional about that work.
Yeah, great strategy, Corey.
And one thing I'll just note is that you'll see absent on the schedule an election. The vote of the people is not required to issue refunding bonds. That's a right reserved to the board of directors in the Washington Constitution. So there isn't necessarily a big public process, but it's reserved for a number of reasons. And one of them being when a savings opportunity comes up, the board can act upon it.
Lee knows his Constitution very well. Any other questions on the refinancing? Corey, I was thinking I would just kind of jump through the last couple slides real quick and then turn it over to Lee if there are any additional questions on the sizable draft refunding resolution. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you, Trevor.
Okay. In just the last couple slides, let me thumb through my hard copy and make sure I have my story straight before I move on. Okay. As we've alluded to, kind of stepping back to that new money bond planning for a possible future election, the thing that Lee and myself will bring to the table and kind of work alongside your construction cost estimators, in the planning folks on the construction side, is working hand in glove with the school district and the staff to make sure that we're thinking about all of those project costs, and then how do we pay for those desired different, scope of work ABC, bonds, state match, interest earnings, impact fees in certain districts can be a piece that is sizable. And then ultimately timing, like how do we structure this debt? When do you need the money? I don't want to issue bonds too far in advance of when you actually need money, because when you issue bonds, the interest clock starts. And so looking at the construction draw schedule is really important, and really leaning on Lee and his team for tax law considerations. There's a lot of different nuance between securities law, state law, federal tax law that have implications on this financing and the structure. And then ultimately looking at different scenarios on how to structure the bonds, how much, when, assessed value, assumptions, interest rate assumptions, and really kind of stress testing and going through different scenarios to make sure we're finding the right one for you. So kind of behind the scenes, before you see some of the output, Sean, Corey, myself, Lee will be running through multiple iterations of scenarios to make sure we're landing on the right answer. And a lot of those, again, those assumptions that need to go into that are interest rates, the bond rating, assessed value, and ultimately the structure of the bonds. How do we detail out the payment of specific principal and interest over time? Mentioned earlier, your strong credit rating at AA3. The highest rating is AAA. Think of that as the state of Washington. This AA category is very strong. Most school districts in the state of Washington kind of hover between this AA3 to A1 category. And all of these are investment grade ratings. So you have a very strong credit rating. During the last surveillance with Moody's, I just broke out a couple of the bullet points from strengths and concerns that were referenced in that document, just to give you a sense of the things that we'll talk about with the rating agency as we go through the process of having them do their due diligence. And last but not least, assessed value. I do have and have received a preliminary assessed value for the school district for calendar 24. It's increased to $7.8 billion. You're about $7.3 billion in 2023. One thing that I've been discussing with your staff and will investigate as we move through time and get some more finite detail, which will drive some of our estimates going forward, are large construction projects within the district boundaries, proposed server farms, and then just really the general economic conditions that create existing property value growth. So we'll work through a lot of those different topics over time to provide you, the school board, with the best answer ultimately before going to the ballot. And this is just a detail, running detail, if you will, going back to 2023 of the assessed value and the percentage changes in each calendar year. Again, very significant growth over the last 5 to 6 years here. Your general economic conditions have been very favorable, and it's been displayed in the growth of the district's assessed value. And last but not least, that's just there for your reference. Plug, we're hosting a conference in downtown Seattle on March 7th. We're going to talk all about municipal finance. So if folks are interested, happy to have board members or any staff participate. So that is an opportunity that's out there for you. I will stop sharing my screen unless folks want to bounce around to different topics. I can always reshare it if necessary. That's the bulk of what I had for tonight. Corey, should we turn it over to Lee to give a high level overview of the draft resolutions?
That sounds great, Trevor. Thanks for your expertise tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you so much for being flexible, you all. Just, literally lifesaver. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
Great. Well, I don't have documents to share. Excuse me for a second. But I can go over sort of what our role is as bond counsel. If this is one of your first borrowings or financings that you're doing for a local government or the school district. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. You've probably seen my colleague Jim McNeil around. He's represented the district for a number of years, and I'm filling in for him today and on this financing. Again, so bond counsel, what do we do? In order for Trevor's company, Piper Sandler, in order for them to purchase the bonds, they require a bond opinion, which is an unqualified opinion from us stating that the bonds are validly issued and are legal and binding obligations of the district. And in order for us to render that opinion, we require that you authorize the bonds properly and that all steps in the process are complied with. That includes state law requirements, federal securities law requirements, and then we also render a tax opinion on the tax exemption of the bonds. So IRS regulations come in as well. So that's what our role is. And the first resolution that we will ask you to act upon on the January 23 meeting is the state bond guarantee resolution. And the state has a program in which they will guarantee voter approved school district bonds with the full faith and credit of the state of Washington. And although the district has a really good rating right now, the state has a AAA rating from Moody's and a AA+ rating from S&P, and those are very high, and they get the district a better rate on the bonds when Trevor goes to remarket them. So the first resolution that we will present will authorize the participation in that program for these refunding bonds. The second resolution is, Trevor referred to it earlier as the delegation resolution. It is the resolution by this board that authorizes the issuance of these bonds for the limited purpose of refunding the 2014 bonds. It's called a delegation resolution because it doesn't actually approve a specific rate or number of bonds or dates. It delegates authority to the secretary of the board, Corey, and then also Sean, the ability to accept the bond purchase agreement so long as the refunding bonds fit within specific parameters set by the board. And those parameters have been informed by Trevor's work in the market and telling us what interest rates, what the top interest rate would be reasonable at this point, and other parameters like that, including the savings parameter as well. So that's what the delegation resolution does. And one of the benefits of that is that we don't have to call the board in for a special meeting to accept the bond purchase agreement on the 5th. That can be done administratively. The resolution then forms a contract between the district and the bondholders. So all of the covenants in the resolution are promises by the district to the bondholders, including, again, the pledge of your full faith and credit and your excess taxing power that was authorized by the voters for the 2014 bonds to collect the amount sufficient to pay the bonds when due. Let's see. And then again, the covenants to comply with federal securities laws and most importantly, the federal tax laws in order to maintain the tax exemption on the bonds. And again, the tax exemption on the bonds allows Trevor again to sell them to investors at a lower yield for a better deal for the district. So that's in a nutshell, what both of those resolutions do. Be happy to answer any questions or either for either of the resolutions or in any of the process as well. It's great having Trevor go first because he provides such a comprehensive presentation. He's also got the more interesting items to discuss.
I guess this is just a confirmation. In Exhibit A, you have what you currently see as the outlying interest rate and other parameters for the debt, which is the fenced area in which the delegation is being granted, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
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 I don't see any other questions.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent. So with that, Lee and Trevor, I just want to thank you both again for your collective wisdom and expertise tonight. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of well, there's a lot of policy language in in many of these documents. So we appreciate the explanation and your time spent with us, and also just guiding us through this process that will ultimately help our taxpayers put some dollars back in their pockets.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much.
So no action on that. We'll take action next meeting. Moving on, then we have our board committee selections. So next on the agenda is the appointment of board members to serve on various committees. According to policy 1240, no more than 2 board members will serve on any board appointed committee. The board chair will appoint board members to serve on each committee, which, as we know, is usually done with based on interest expressed by other board members. Dr. Kalahar, if you could now provide an overview of the committees and their roles, that would be great.
Excellent. I would love to. So this is the fun part. For the budget committee, we have a budget committee that was created last year out of a desire for transparency and necessity from Superintendent Eagle. With the large numbers that we need to reduce in our district, we want to have an ongoing update in our system. The 2 board member team will meet with the cabinet regularly to have an update to the budget overall. And my recommendation here would be to have Martin continue on this committee if he's interested, due to the continuity that would add to the budget committee, and then his experience with large budgets. And since Laura was also on the committee before, we would welcome other interested folks as well. And I don't know if do we want to just talk about budget now, and then I'll move on to policy in a minute? Or you want me to go through all of them first?
Yeah, let's go through all the policies first.
Gotcha. So the second one, the policy committee is another 2 board member committee that focuses on district policy. Kim White co-facilitates that group with me as we negotiate through necessary updates and revisions from WASDA, as well as policy concerns that just kind of find their way to the surface that we need to revisit. Both Martin and Maria have been on this committee in the past and could provide experience to the team, but we welcome any new members that might be interested as well. And then finally, we're asking for representation from 2 of our board members on the bond facility committee, which is not a board committee necessarily, but we're asking board members to be present and representative of that. And we're looking for I'm sorry, I lost my spot here. We're looking for representation from the board on this committee, which will be largely built from community members, district stakeholders, staff, and of course, 2 board members as well. And then later we'll talk a little bit about nominations for one of our board members to be the WASDA legislative representative. So all of those things. Yeah, thank you for the time.
So I think it's appropriate to discuss all the committees together and kind of gauge who's interested for each of the 3, so we can ideally allocate or share responsibilities. So is there anyone interested? I tend to agree. I think Martin would be a good fit on the budget committee still, but is there competing interest, other interest? Anyone else interested?
No.
I mean, I'll assign people anyway, so I know.
I was in facilities.
Don't worry, I kind of have a gauge of where I think some people are interested.
Everyone be like, Tucker.
I know. I know, no. It would be, right, it would be helpful to know if this is like within your top three or not at all interest committees, just so, because I would like to have people participating and doing things they kind of are interested in doing, so that's fine, limited interest on that one, maybe policy committee, and I can always circle back to if, just depending on how conversation goes, but policy committee, we typically have had for continuity, a current serving member serve with maybe a newer member to the board because it's a good way to get exposure. I know that would put Martin potentially tied up on two committees. I had forgotten until Corey mentioned it, that Maria has also served on the policy committee. So if we wanted to sub Maria or Martin for another between each other, that would be fine too.
I'd be more than happy to do policy committee.
Any other interest on, remember, we need two people.
Interested in the policy committee also. I'm happy with either. I'm not favoring one. Any of the committees, I think it'd be a good opportunity.
Okay.
Either way.
Perfect. And then facilities committee, who? I know, okay.
I think Tucker wants to be part of the
Not
facility
sure
committee.
if I understood that.
Can I put in my sense on the facilities committee? And I don't know, maybe this is not the committee. I don't believe we had board members in I don't know. Have we had board members participate in the bond facility committee, in the bond facility, in the, what do we call that?
Facilities committee.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's also there will also be a citizens committee.
That's
as
what I'm
well
thinking.
That is created as well, so we can have participation in both.
Okay.
Uh,
And the reason I say this is because I think what we experienced in the last bond and where some of the board members stood on it really made an impact on the results of the election.
Agreed.
And so whether it's, and I think it was a board president at the time, could be wrong. Martin, you're looking at me, I think.
No, I don't remember.
Okay, oh, yeah, okay. But I just think whether it's the facilities committee or the facility citizen committee, I think, not to put you on the spot, Julie, but I think the experience from however many years ago was that the board president was not supportive of that bond. And I think it really made an impact on the results of that. That's my 2 cents on that.
For what it's worth, I'm super supportive of the next effort, but I do, in some of the things that we heard from the conference, I do think, although I think the board should be relatively aligned, I think we are going to, as we develop this through the facilities plan, going to want to find those folks who are not supportive so that we can vet their opinions as well. Because if we come through entirely, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and not respectfully considering the other sides of the opinion, that could bite us as well. But from my perspective, I'm not aware of anyone who's not supportive of the bond. So I have no concern with anyone in particular serving on the facilities committee. So
I think I would want to add something on the facilities committee. I think it's not just supporting the bond, it's making the citizens, the community, the administration and the bond understand each other and interact. So I think having two board members working with that committee, and yep, they better behave, being constructively both ways, as you say, listening to negative and positive and making sure that we interact effectively. I think that's really important.
So I'm not hearing super confident interest. Where I'm leaning towards right now is budget. I feel like is not super interested in, and Corey and I have talked before, it might be good for me to be on that. So I'm happy to, if Martin is happy to continue on the budget.
I am very happy to continue, want to do that.
Okay, so I would suggest that Martin and I serve on the budget committee. I am suggesting that Miranda and Maria serve on the policy committee, if you're okay with being ousted, Martin.
Yeah.
I am looking for, let's see, Tucker, you think you want facilities? I'm not sure.
I mean, I do something else if you want.
No. I do think, Tucker, I'd love for you to be on facilities. This is one I had previously had a really serious interest in. I don't want to assign myself too much. So if anyone has a stronger interest, I would put my own interest aside and more than happy to have anyone else. And if you're not, then I'll just write myself in there too.
I'll jump in too and help with being on.
So do I understand correctly that the Citizens Committee will also have board representation? So it'll be two different
It could.
board members on,
Yeah, it could have two different board members, or it could be a continuation of the work, but we may want to diversify when it gets to that time.
well, I mean, it seems like the more people involved.
Yeah.
The more we are approaching our different communities with that information. And so I know that it's not always easy to track down one of us via email, but if we're all involved in some way, people are more likely to come face to face to a board member and say, hey, I don't understand exactly what this is.
Well,
So-
that's a wonderful iteration of the reasons why, because this is going to be something that our community has to embrace. And so the more we are all involved in some capacity, then the better understanding we'll have of what our community will be willing to support. I appreciate that.
So I'm happy to have Miranda do it unless there's any concern on two newer board members being on a committee. I don't see any.
No, I think we're looking for perspective from the board, but we're also looking at a fresh look at what this bond can do for our community now. It's different than it was 6 years ago when the other bond was there. And so coming at it with new eyes and new lens is very appreciative. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Then I'm happy to put Tucker and Maria on the facilities. Or Miranda, sorry. I was looking at Maria saying Miranda. So Martin and Julie on budget, Miranda and Maria on policy, Tucker and Maria on.
Miranda.
God, I'm so sorry. Too many M's. Tucker and Miranda on facilities. Thank you. All right. That's moving on. So then next, because that doesn't require any kind of formal motion, we'll move on to our action items, which will now take nominations for the election of our WASDA legislative representative per board policy 1225. This is a 2-year term. The board's WASDA legislative representatives serves as the contact person and acts as the coordinator of the board's legislative activities. The legislative rep also serves as the board's liaison to the WASDA General Assembly. Do I have any nominations for the position of the WASDA legislative representative for a 2-year term serving January 2024 through December of 2025? Are there any further nominations? I actually wanted to nominate Maria. And you may decline that nomination if you're not interested.
I respectfully decline.
So are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I will deem nominations closed, and this will be a roll call vote. So we'll now have a roll call vote to serve as for, I'm going to write it in, Miranda.
Do we need to second that?
Seconded.
Yeah. No. So now a roll call vote for Miranda to serve as the WASDA legislative representative for the school board for the 2-year term beginning January 2024 through December 2025. Start with Maria.
Aye.
Miranda.
Aye.
I, Tucker.
Aye.
And Martin.
Aye.
So congratulations. Miranda is approved, is nominated to assume the role of the Wasda legislative representative for the board for the next 2 years. Congratulations. Moving on, school bus purchases.
School bus purchases. Let's talk about it. I want to just lend a distinction to the board. And as you all know from our conversations about school budgets, that when we talk about budget reductions for the Wenatchee School District, we're talking about the general fund. When we talk about school bus purchases, we're talking about the transportation fund. So two completely different, self-balancing funds that we're discussing. So today's conversation comes out of the transportation fund. So we are requesting the board approve the purchase of a new Bluebird bus from Bryson Sales and Services of Washington. The purchase relates to the 24-25 school year and also will relate to the 24-25 school budget and the transportation fund as opposed to the general fund. Due to delivery delays and supply chain issues, it is necessary for the district to secure bus orders as far in advance as possible. So the district transportation needs are met for each school year. This particular bus is for our special education program, and due to the increases in special education enrollment, we will be adding an additional bus route that will be created next year. So it'll require an additional bus to serve this route. So that's the rationale and reasoning behind it. And yeah, any questions on that? Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So we need a motion to
Yeah.
approve.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the purchase of a bus as presented. Does this bus have a name? Of one Bluebird yellow bus in the amount of $154,247.05.
And I will second that motion to purchase an A34 bus for that amount.
Motion and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have the superintendent's report, Dr. Kalahar.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, just excited about the new year and a few things that I'd like to share that I was able to attend before winter break. Head coach Scott Devereaux's retirement celebration on December 20th. The athletic department held a celebration for Coach Devereaux, who has greatly impacted the lives of student athletes that he has coached throughout the years. This event was strategically timed to allow former student athletes who might be home for the holidays to come and honor their coach. It was really cool. The new Commons was packed with students and athletes, coaches, colleagues, family, just a very warm celebration. I was just excited to see many former students share their memories of being coached by Mr. Devereaux and how he impacted their lives, not only then, but still to this day. So it was heartwarming. It was great. And we also had, and you may have read this in the Wenatchee School District newsletter last week, but Valley Academy third grader Sadie Hammond won the 2,000 meter race in the U.S. National Junior Olympic Cross Country Championships in Louisville, Kentucky on December 9th. Holy cow. She emerged victorious among 231 of the fastest 8-year-olds in the country, hedging a win by 0.3 of a second. So we're kudos to Sadie and very excited for that fast human that goes to school in our district. Holy cow. Other great things that happened before winter break is a lot of the holiday giving, and school resource officer Fuller partnered with Walmart to fill boxes with turkeys and all the fixings for a holiday meal just before the winter break. 50 high school and middle school families received these boxes. And the Wenatchee Police Department and other law enforcement agencies support our elementary students with the Shop with a Cop event. So this is Officer Fuller's idea and way to impact our secondary students as well. So we just thank Officer Fuller for giving back to our community. And that's all I have for you today.
Thank you. Is there any board communication? note that in.
As a former athlete and former coach, congratulations to Scott on his retirement. Like it's a huge thing for someone to serve in a community for 20 years. Like the number of people you touch is amazing. So thank you for your service and best of luck in retirement.
That it? Maria?
Oh, just, it looks like we might get out of here in time to attend the varsity basketball game at Town Toyota Center.
I've got nothing. All in favor of adjourning? All right.
Thank you.